So first off, I'm going to just have you guys say your first and last name, and then also just tell me what you do for a living. So Nabila, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Moses, and then Billy.
Hi, my name is Nabila Islam, a former candidate for Georgia's 7th Congressional District. And right now I am still helping voters be engaged and get involved in the electoral process.
Hi, my name is Moses Robinson. I am a IT multimedia developer at Emory University School of Medicine.
Hi, I'm Billy Michael Honor. I serve as the director of faith organizing for an organization called the New Georgia Project. We are a civic engagement organization that works primarily at the intersection of voting rights and community organizing.
Awesome. So are you guys all from the Atlanta area or from Georgia? And kind of just talk about how Congressman Lewis may have impacted your life or inspired you to be where you are today.
Well, I'll start off. I'm born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey. And I watched the program where I saw Hosea Williams. And then I saw some video of Congressman John Lewis. And I said, you know what? I got to move to Atlanta. I got to meet these pillar of leaders that, just pave the way for me to be, get the things that I have now and that sometimes we take for granted. So I moved in 1990 and got to meet Congressman Lewis. I'm a photographer also. So I've been recording history for over 30 years here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I was actually born in Atlanta, at Crawford Long Hospital, and I grew up in Gwinnett County. And Congressman John Lewis has always been a source of inspiration. He was someone at the very young, tender age of 23, was a keynote speaker during the 1963 Civil Rights March. At such a young age, he was so impactful. At 25, he almost died marching at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And it just, to me, it was such an inspiration that someone that young made such a crucial difference in his generation. And he talks about how Rosa Parks and MLK inspired him and gave him permission to be who he was and be an activist. And for me, he was a similar role model where, he was someone that was local that I could relate to. And it really inspired me to get involved in working in politics at a young age of 21. And I just recently ran for office. And so his story is so powerful. And I know that he's been such an impact to so many people all over the country in my generation as well.
Yeah, for me, I'm born and raised in Orlando, Florida. And part of what I was thinking about this the other day of the legacy of, I grew up in what we call Black churches, and we always had elected officials coming in and out of the congregation I was a part of. A lot of members of the Congressional Black Caucus came through. One of them was John Lewis, who came to town when we were in the middle of a gerrymandering fight. Our local congressperson, who we love dearly, they were trying to gerrymander their district, and he came to town to speak about why gerrymandering was a new form of poll tax, and I'll never forget that speech. I didn't know that many years later, I would be living in Atlanta, Georgia, involved in some of those fights. And then the John Lewis Fellows Program, I got a chance to meet Representative Lewis there when I was invited to talk about the connection between faith and civic engagement with these young people that he created this program for that would be mentored every summer here in Atlanta around how they could get involved in civic work. And so I'm indebted to him for so many reasons.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting, and this is why I love different perspectives, is that Congressman Lewis obviously has been an inspiration for both you, Nabila, and for you, Billy. And you two come from two totally different faith backgrounds, but somehow find common ground in the work that Congressman Lewis has done. What do you think that says about his work and his legacy?
I mean, his messaging was all about, we live in the same house. We are all brothers and sisters. We should all be able to, work together, play together. And I think his message was always about unity and inclusivity, no matter what your faith was or your skin color. And that transcended, different faiths and different backgrounds. And I think that, like I mentioned, I truly think he had such an incredible impact with so many different people, whether it was a daughter of Bangladeshi immigrants or it's someone else from a different background. He was someone that was very relatable.
Yeah. And I also think that his message was about really the expansion of democracy for all. And there's no way to talk about the expansion of democracy for all and not include broad cross sections of the American public. And I think that was really part of why he was able to touch so many people, is because the message was really about how does everyone, no matter their class, creed, color, or religion, have access to this dream of a multiracial democracy that America's been working on all these years.
Yeah, and another thing, Nabila, that you mentioned that was interesting, and I'm going to tie this into when I met Moses and his son previously, was you mentioned that Congressman Lewis impacted and inspired you, even though you are a different generation, you're much younger. He has inspired you. And Moses, I saw the same thing with your son, who's 15, who has kind of grasped the messaging of John Lewis's life's work. Why do you think he was able to appeal to multi-generations like you guys?
But I think that one of the reasons why was because of his faith. I think his faith was really strong. And he was just a great person. That when you spoke with him one-on-one, it was like he gave you his undivided attention. And little that we know that Congressman Lewis, all the people that he touched, he's been passing the torch to all of us. And we have to remember, just, again, he was only 23. And that's why now I coach my son's baseball team, because he always wants us to give back and do more and just never forget, what they've done, and for us to continue to fight and continue for justice for everyone.
His message of, get into some good trouble, make a difference. That is impactful no matter what generation you're in. And I really feel that, he's such an awe-inspiring figure who's consistently outspoken, but whether it was about racial justice, voting rights, dreamers, healthcare, he's been at the forefront at every issue. And so he's never stopped speaking up for all of us. Whether it was back in the 60s or if it was back in the 90s or even up until recently, he always kept fighting. And so I think he's just someone that we've grown up with and he's been part of our lives.
And when each of you guys think about whether it's parenting and passing on those lessons to your children, or whether it's in the work that you guys do now, what would you say is something about Congressman Lewis and what he stood for that is really applicable to what you guys do?
For me, it's if you see a good fight, get in it. You've heard the quote so many times already over the last several days, appropriately so. We've heard it already today about good trouble. I think that phrase is so important because one of the things that we know about the civil rights movement of the 20th century is that many of those individuals jumped in that fight to a lot of discomfort to their own lives, and that we really can't create change, the type of change that we really need to see, if you aren't willing to have some civic courageousness. And I think that's the thing that I carry to many parts of my own personal life, is that you have to be willing to have courage. You have to be willing to sacrifice and take a risk, oftentimes for things that truly matter.
Well, I can say that Congressman Lewis, I used to watch him when little kids would come up to him and just ask him just any question. And he was just, he was intrigued, and he had this glow in his face. he loved telling stories. He was a good storyteller. He loved telling stories of what he's gone through and what he expects from even them to be successful and to give back and be a part of what's going on at what time that is going on. So he really was an inspiration, especially for little kids. They loved him, and he loved them. As far as with my son, my son would always want to shake his hand, and he'll say, "Son, I'm gonna shake your hand first, but I got to get a hug second." And that's what Congressman Lewis was like. He was just genuine. He was lovable, and he loved telling stories, and didn't mind, letting you know what it's going to take for all of us to be a part of this world and in the United States to be really happy and fair and basically just love one another.
And Congressman John Lewis really understood that, progress is not linear, that change takes a lifetime, that you must always continue to fight and persevere. And that is something that I've taken to myself personally in the work that I do. And I try to inspire other folks with that message as well, that, you got to fight the good fight. And Congressman John Lewis never, shied away from being a fighter. And so he was very inspirational and will be so missed. And it's up to all of us to continue his work.
Yeah. And I guess I'll leave with this question. Like Nabila, you just mentioned, Moses, you already mentioned, how do we continue, or how do we all continue his work? Now that he's gone, even, there's still work to be done, but how do you all continue John Lewis's work?
For me, I believe in, they say each one teach one. And I'm always trying to teach youth about our history, about the fight, about loving one another, doing the right thing, all the things that Congressman Lewis believed in, most of the things that I think he believed in. But just listen to people, listen to their differences. And you don't have to always agree, but you can respect one another. And I think that was one of the things that he really left with me.
I think we continue the legacy of John Lewis by continuing to fight for an America that's as good as his promise. When I think about his life and his sacrifice, that's what it was about. He believed in America. Make no doubt about it. He believed in the promise of America. And all of the fights, whether it was the protests, the many protests that he would show up to, just without letting people know he was just going to show up and be among the crowd, that was all because he believed in the promise of America, and he wanted an America as good as his promise. And what that means for many of us is to continue the fight for voting rights. Long before he was a congressman, he ran a voting rights organization that registered millions of people to vote. And so continuing that legacy of voter registration, of getting people engaged in the civic process, and then fighting for their right to make sure that their votes are counted, right? That means passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That means on state level, making sure that we continue to do the hard work of making sure that we get rid of these laws that keep so many out of the process simply because of groups that want to fight the future, right? He was all about us expanding democracy, and that's the fight that we have to continue. That's his legacy.
I want to say that I echo everything Billy said, 100%. John Lewis was a movement leader in the forefront of a movement, and continued to be so. He was an activist, a movement leader. He got involved in the electoral process as an elected official, passed legislation. The work that I'm focusing on right now is trying to make sure that we get out the vote this November, making sure that people know how to vote, that they are not disenfranchised from voting, that we combat voter suppression, that we also encourage more people from our Black and Brown communities to run for office, because when we're not at the table, we're on the menu, and helping folks from our communities represent us and give us a voice and continue to speak truth to power, just like Congressman Lewis did, and to always speak the truth.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's all I have, unless any of you guys have anything Any final thoughts you guys want to add? I think that is all I have. Yeah, no? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys all so much for being a part of this. It's just important to, hear from you guys and get, get your voices out there. So I really appreciate it. So I'm going to stop the recording here.